This is the 1:30 special meeting. Are we going to take roll, or are we just going to acknowledge that there is a quorum present? Okay, there's a quorum present. We're acknowledging that. We have one item on this agenda. Council, would you like to tell us what we're doing in closed session? Just a second. I think, we're still in the open session part, so I'm going to ask if there's any public comment so we could leave the doors open. Well, thank you.
Good afternoon. I do not have the special meeting notice in front of me, but I'm happy to tell the public and the board and the chair that we will be going into closed session on an item concerning the executive officer's performance evaluation, and we can adjourn to do that presently.
All right. Thank you. Is there any public comment on the item that we're going to be discussing in closed session? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and we'll go into closed session.
There we go.
The board has just been in a special meeting closed session, and council, would you announce any action taken in closed session?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and members of the board and public. The board did meet in closed session on item 3A, Public Employee Performance Evaluation, Government Code Section 54957, concerning the FORA Executive Officer. The board heard from council and heard from the Executive Officer and gave direction to the Executive Officer, and there's nothing further to report.
Thank you. And with that, we will adjourn the special meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority and call to order the regular Friday, August 9th, 2019 meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. And the first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Steve Matarazzo, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Thank you. And because closed session is something that we can never get enough of, our next item is to go into closed session. Council, would you let the public know what we'll be discussing?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the board and public. Item 3A, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956, a 56.9A D1, Marina Community Partners versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, Monterey County Superior Court Case number 18CV871. That's a pending litigation matter. The second item, 3B, is conference with legal counsel. One item of potential litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9D1. And we had listed as item 3C a conference with labor negotiators. The subject matter of that particular listing has been addressed in the special meeting, and so 3C will come off.
Thank you. Any member of the public wishing to comment on the items that will be discussed in closed session?
Chair, as a member of the public and not as a board member, I do have a couple of questions on 3A. My recollection is that the trial date is set for September 9th, and that on March 1st of this year, court gave FORA 30 days to amend its cross-complaint against Marina. My questions, I'd like to have them on the record if I may. Has FORA decided to not amend the cross-complaint? Has FORA decided to, in lieu, to dismiss the case as it relates to Marina? And thirdly, if in fact the case doesn't settle, what's the likelihood of the September 9th date having to be continued?
Yes, thank you for those questions. Those are matters of strategic attorney-client privileged information, and I'm not able to, as you, a member of the city of Marina, clearly you have a conflict and are not entitled to that information. So I can't disclose that here in open session, and we'll address that item in closed session.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
They are off the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on closed session items? All right, seeing none, we will recess to closed session and return as soon as we can. In the Friday, August 9th, 2019 meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, Council, would you announce any action taken in closed session?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members of the board and public, the board did meet in closed session on items 3A and 3B. 3A is the Marina Community Partners case. Council did give a status report on the pending litigation to the board, and there is no reportable action there. And on the potential litigation item 3B, Council also gave an update on the status of that dispute, and there is nothing to report on that matter. And again, item 3C was dropped.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is acknowledgements, announcements, and correspondence.
Chair, we have a few announcements. One, I read an announcement today that indicated that the SB 189 would likely be heard in hearing on the 14th of August. assembly appropriation, is what I understand. Wanted to list that. Second, for those of you that follow this, the Veterans Administration of the State of California, California Department of Veterans Affairs has been continuing to move ahead with the cemetery. The EIR is complete. They are still in their 30-day window, but it is complete. They did have their pre-bid conference at Port Order Reuse Authority offices. 9 contractors showed up. We anticipated only 4, but 9 contractors, which bodes well for the bidding process on completing the next phase of the cemetery so that we can have in-ground burials. Thank you, Congressman Panetta's office for your help in that regard, and Senator Monning's office. Nicole's not here. And then just a quick note, the Habitat Conservation Plan is currently under review by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. All of the documents are in. We are in process. We're moving ahead toward public review. We don't have an exact date, but we still believe the published date could be late September, early October. I'm not sure exactly the date, but I have been in communication with folks at headquarters in Washington, D.C. and the regional office in Ventura, and I believe we are on a path forward.
Thank you. Any questions from board members on any of the announcements? All right, thank you. We will move now to roll call so we can officially begin.
Supervisor Parker, here. Supervisor Phillips. Supervisor Adams. Councilmember Gagliotti. Councilmember Frank O'Connell. Councilmember Berkeley. Councilmember Smith. Mayor Oglesby. Here. Councilmember Wizard.
Here.
Mayor Marianne Carbone. Mayor Gunter. Councilmember Garfield. Councilmember Reimers. Here. Kathleen Lee. Nicole Hollingsworth. Erica Parker. Mike Zeller. Dr. P.K. Diffenbaugh. Steve Matarazzo. Andre Lewis. Colonel Ford. Bill Collins. David Martin. Lisa Reinheiner. Dr. Matt Zepperman. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item is our consent agenda. Is there any board member who would like to pull any item for question or comment? Any member of the public with a question or comment on the consent agenda? All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Thank you. Motion by O'Connell, second by Phillips. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Those pass unanimously. Move to our business items. First is the Executive Officer Contract Amendment. This is a second vote. And I would just note that the amendments to the contract that were discussed at the last meeting are incorporated in the document in front of you.
Yes,
John,
they're in my clear handwriting, so there shouldn't be any problem. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to entertain them. What we did was just rely on what had been decided last meeting and incorporated, I can tell you on page 2 concerning paid leave. The new edition reads, in addition to the 49 paid leave days stated above, Poulamard shall be entitled for the period from September 1 to September 31, 2019 only to an additional 20 management leave days. If Poulamard does not use these additional 20 management leave days between September 1 and December 31, he will lose those days and shall not be entitled to any further compensation for those management leave days. That was the one item. And the second item that was added on page 3 concerning, it's under the heading of insurance and concerns the Medicare Part B coverage. That addition reads, in addition to the insurance benefits described herein, Hula Mart shall be entitled for the period of July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2021 to be reimbursed for premiums paid for Medicare Part B coverage. And those were the two items that you decided upon last meeting and have been incorporated into the Executive Officer's Employment Agreement, which is dated July 1, 2014.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from board members? Yes,
I
Director
do have a
Adams.
question. Unfortunately, I was not here at the last meeting, and perhaps this information was presented at that time, but I didn't see it in anything that I had read. Is there a figure for what the total value is of the additional benefits that are being provided?
I was not provided one as the Authority Council, a specific number. So, no, as far as I know, unless somebody from FORA staff can help, I don't think there's been a number.
Okay, any other questions? Any members of the public with questions or comments on this second vote? Okay, so then it's a second vote, which means basically we have a motion on the table, right? And a motion in the second. So I'll just say as a comment that I voted against this last time. I'm going to vote no again because this was just not the direction that I thought was best. So I'll just stay consistent in my vote for that reason, not so much on the terms of the contract per se. Any other comments or discussion? Yes, Director Adams.
Although I'm very supportive of where we're going, I'm going to abstain from the vote because I don't feel I have enough information without that full number to be able to vote.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Great, so we've got some ayes. All those opposed, please say no. No. Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. We'll move now to the building removal. Yes.
The motion does pass.
Yes, motion does pass. Oh, thank you. Yes. We'll move now to business item 8B, building removal financing update.
Yes, Chair, this has been an all-hands-on-deck effort that has been included all of the members of our administrative committee. It's included the staffs in the county fire department, the county treasurer's office. It's included City of Marina, City of Seaside staff. Peter Said will provide an overview on a PowerPoint, but clearly this is a process that the board has seen now for the fourth time before this board on what we could do to leave the community with what City Manager Craig Malin calls a wonderful parting present. And this is about the possibilities that we could use our revenue stream from the tax increment enabled by state law to put together enough of a bond issuance that could complete literally all of the significant remaining building removal with some exceptions. Peter?
Thank you, Board. I'll be providing a general overview, and then we have brought Mark Northcross from our advisor or consulting team, NHA Advisors, in as well, and he will be able to cover a lot of the specifics for this particular program. So, by way of background, to update everybody where we have been, in July 2018, the Administrative Committee recommended that FORA investigate building removal bond feasibility. We brought that forward in October 2018 to the board, and the FORA board directed staff to investigate the legality and feasibility of issuing bond debt against FORA's statutory share of the property tax revenue stream provided by the FORA by the state legislature as codified in the state and California Health and Safety Code. And through December 2018 and January 2019, we went through a public procurement process. And in March 2019, we selected NHA Advisors as our bond consultant. The selection process involved the county, it involved Marina, it involved Seaside. The scope that was set for NHA has a three-phase scope. The first two phases were completed, and the third phase we're going to talk about today. The first one was to confirm the legality of financing, and the second was to prepare a financial plan for the board to review. The result of the legal analysis is fairly straightforward, and that is that FORA does have the authority to bond. It's with the terms extending beyond the dissolution of FORA. I want to reread that because I stumbled all over that one there. FORA has the authority to issue bonds with terms extending beyond dissolution. The bonds have to be done per the Marks-Roos Act. That's different from the Mellows-Roos Act. It's the Marks-Roos Act. And the bonds have to be used only in the Fort Ord boundary. We also did a quantitative analysis. This involved the county auditor controller. We talked individually with each jurisdiction. We did a low versus high build-out scenario of best worst case scenarios. We identified additional stakeholders and interested parties that we were not aware of when it started. Those are the Monterey County Regional Fire District, Monterey Bay Peninsula Unified School District, the Monterey Peninsula College, TAMC, MST, MCWD, and State Parks. And NHA came to the conclusion or estimation that we could probably bond in the $37 million range. This is a summary of the analysis, and I'll have Mark talk to this point if you want more details on this analysis. But in short, it was all done in present value. It's called present value. What this does is it allows you to look at two types of financing. The first is a one-time lump sum payment that comes from the bond. And the second is a cash flow analysis which extends out over 30 years. This allows us to talk apples to apples. When we talk apples to apples, what we're able to see is that the net benefit is positive across the board with a real de minimis impact to Delray Oaks and to the Monterey County Regional Fire District. The work that has the administrative committee recommended that we move forward with this work, and the work that was recommended was, one, prepare a fiscal consultant report. This was to be done by our consultant, Economic Planning Systems. The second component is to be done by NHA, and it's to identify the percent of public rights-of-way for each of the areas, establish a prioritization process for fund distribution, establish an amendment methodology, and this has to do with what happens if we save funds and can we apply those funds elsewhere, and what happens if unforeseen, unexpected things happen. And also to set up an invoicing and payment methodology ahead of time to get rid of any particular conflicts that could happen in the future. This is for the tax-exempt areas and for the taxable areas primarily. Then there's bond counsel. And NHA has recommended working with Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Ralph to prepare official statements. These are the disclosure documents that have to go to Standard & Poor's. They also have to go to the bond investors and to the bond insurance group. And they recommended something that came to light that we hadn't seen was they recommended including a contingency of $65,000 on the additional work. And this is because there could be a lot of time that gets taken up in negotiating the specifics of the bond administration between the different stakeholders. So the timeline for this is that we are looking to hit two main milestones. There are those diamonds in the bottom. The first is the September board meeting, and the second is the October board meeting. Between now and the September board meeting, we are working with UPS to finish that fiscal consultant report. We will then be working with the administrative committee to set up the percent taxable, to identify the prioritization process, and to get the amendment voicing ready. We'll bring back to the board in September the bond documents for your review. It then will go out to the county, and this is a public hearing at the county whereby the supervisors recognize that the money that will be bonded will be spent within the Fort Ord area, and then it will come back to the FORA board for their approval, for your approval. The recommendation that we have is that you authorize all necessary preparatory work to issue bonds for building removal and approve the executive officer to move forward with the draft schedule presented by NHA advisors. Mark will talk about that in a second. To approve a fiscal consultant's report not to exceed $40,000, to approve NHA advisors for the municipal advisor and SYCR. I can't remember the bonds council's long name. We'll do that for an amount equal to $200,000 plus a $65,000 contingency, and work with the county and jurisdiction on post-FORA administration. Also to secure jurisdictional support for the proposed schedule, and lastly to work with the regional fire district on the revenue loss related issues that they have. So that is the recommendation that staff has. Mark, I'm going to invite you to come on up, and we're both available. Well, I'll let Mark talk about any specifics if he wants, but we're both available for your questions.
Thank you, Peter. Mark Rithcross, NHA Advisors. It's a pleasure to be here. And this is a very, I'll say, pivotal and exciting time. The reason why is that I know that this board, over the years, there's been ups and downs and so forth. We've gotten very lucky. We are in a historic low bond market, meaning that if there ever was a time for this board to issue debt to go fund remediation or whatever else the board wants, now is the time. Just one example, non-quantitative, of just how incredibly strong this bond market is. German government 30-year bonds have negative yield. There are mortgages in Europe now that have you can get 30-year mortgages with negative yield, i.e. the lender is paying you to take out the mortgage. This is crazy. I never thought in my life I would see this. I don't see Hans, the city manager of Monterey, here, but I'm thinking we should send him to Germany to get some of those people buying 30-year bonds at negative yields to consider a great deal in the Monterey Bay Area. So that's the background. That is the urgency that I personally feel, because I'm looking a gift horse in the mouth and I'm thinking, I don't know how long this is going to last, but I really want to get all my clients that I can into this market because there's a lot of money on the table. So that's the short story. We're happy to go into the quant. Peter put a slide up there showing, in fact, Peter, maybe press the buttons to go back to that slide. Peter correctly noted that the challenge in quantifying the relative benefit for the stakeholders in FORA is how do you get the apples and apples on having a major allocation of bond proceeds for remediation, that's cash and fizz today, compared to having a revenue stream over the next 25 years. And you use this thing in mathematics called present value analysis, and that's what we did. The allocation of bond proceeds was worked out very carefully by Peter and FORA staff, and so I cannot address that. I can say that this board can spend the bond proceeds and allocate them any way you want, consistent with the authorizing statute. Okay, so that's your choice. Peter also mentioned bond administration. Normally, that's not a big deal. And the reason why is that the bond investors don't care about those issues. You care. And the core reason why, I'll use the analogy of a home remodeling project. Probably most of the people in the room have been through one. We all know they're called surprises. You get into the wall, whatever, you find a surprise. Everything I've learned from this community around FORA is that remediation can also have a lot of surprises. So you need to decide beforehand, this is my recommendation, the bond investors don't care. You need to put in writing, though, in black and white, how you deal with surprises, which means that if we are going to amend the allocation we decide on, how do we amend it? What are the ground rules? Who makes that decision? In addition, whether the Moaning Bill, SB 189, passes and is signed by the governor or not, this board will not be around for the full term of the bonds. The bonds will last the full term of the successor agencies now within the FORA jurisdiction. So the question on the table is that whether this board goes away in 2020 or 2022, the bonds go on for another 20 plus years. Who's going to be in charge of doing what a bond issuer does? Which is, again, there's surprises. You need to make decisions on one thing or another. Things happen. How do you do that? Again, lots of flexibility. There's no right or wrong. The bond investors don't care, but you care. So that's why we put in the whole piece about coming up with an agreement now on bond administration that deals with the dissolution of FORA and how we deal with, I'll call it, surprises in our giant home remodeling project. So that's the short side of my report, and Peter and I are available to answer questions.
Thank you. Board member questions? Yes, Director Berkeley.
So I was just reviewing, I noticed you have a scenario 2 and scenario 4 up there. Are you suggesting, and as I've read through the packet, that scenario 2 is what you think is the best scenario?
We did 4 scenarios, but 2 of them really came down, I think, to the realistic comparison. By the way, great question. I would call scenario 2 the do-nothing scenario. That means there's no extension of FORA, and there is no money for remediation. Implicit in that, we spent a lot of time doing the quant on this, is that the new development in Marina, Seaside, and the unincorporated county is a lot less if there's no remediation. Okay, that's particularly in Marina and Seaside. So do nothing means there's no bonds, there's no extension, and there really is a lot lower level of development. So the biggest contrast scenarios we show is scenario 3, which I'll call the do something scenario, which is where you extend 2 years, you issue bonds, you got, God willing, 37 million. Actually, it would be even more this week. I would even give out the number because it's I don't know if it's believable. And you, as a result of all the remediation, you get a lot of growth, Marina and Seaside, and East Garrison, the county as well, which means you get more assessed valuation, more property taxes. And so that comparison is, again, making it, real visceral, I'll say, is do nothing versus do everything you can. And you look at and that's why you see under the green heading scenario 3, you see net bond proceeds, and you see some really large numbers showing up there, which go into the present value. And clearly on the do something scenario, Marina and Seaside come out way ahead because they get a lot of growth. As Peter said, Delray Oaks, really kind of marginal. Monterey County comes out ahead more or less by amount equal to their bond allocation. And Peter can explain what the staff thinks should be done for remediation in the East Garrison area. The fire district loses about $1 million on a present value basis. So we're talking $30,000-$40,000 a year. And we have our fire district representative saying they're hello. Then we have the 2 transit authorities and the water district. They obviously come out way ahead because by amount equal to their allocation of bond proceeds. Then we found out that our biggest stakeholder were our 2 educational institutions. We didn't know this. They come out way ahead. Why do they come out so much better with bonds and remediation? Because the assessed value goes up and there's more property tax generated. We have made, I want to give a caution, and I have to give this as a professional, the assumption that under basic state aid for school districts and for community college districts, if the governor does not, through the complicated formulas, get any increased property tax revenue that goes to the school districts. I am not a school finance person. I don't know that. I see our excellent school district person here, but that's just a caution. Very big numbers, very big benefit on paper for the school districts, subject to someone who knows saying the governor's not going to find a way through their state aid formulas to get that money. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Chair, I have just one other question around that too. So in scenario one, I noticed that would assume 2020.
That was basically bonds, remediation, higher growth, but no extension. SB 189 is not signed by the governor.
Right.
And so what happens is there's 2 years worth of property tax money that otherwise would have gone to the stakeholders, okay, that and then in the extension scenario, 2022 scenario 3, goes to continues to go to the stakeholders as if there is no dissolution. If you in scenario 1, you've got the post-dissolution stakeholders getting more money, and that's the difference in the quant. The bond proceeds are the same, and the growth is the same. It's just that you've got 2 years of stakeholders getting a different allocation because FORA dissolves as the authorizing statute says.
Okay. Good enough. Go ahead. Director O'Connell. Anyone else with questions?
Thank you, Chair. For the last several months, and as late as actually July 3rd, it's been requested by the City of Marina that your bond counsel get in contact with our bond counsel to discuss our concerns. And I was informed just today that communication finally took place yesterday. And at that time, your bond counsel said that they have to look further at statutes that may relate to the bond issuance,
Okay.
etc. Have you been in contact with your bond counsel?
I have not heard that. Brian Forbath at Stradling has not contacted me since yesterday, so I can't answer your question. But thank you. I will, when I get out of this meeting, I'm going to call him.
Yeah, that does concern me because I think the city's in favor of this, but I don't know what the concerns are. But obviously the concerns are such that the answers couldn't be given back and forth.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Wizard?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Just a quick clarifying question. Did I hear you correctly regarding the valuation and the present value as though MPUSD's funding was basic aid?
No, we just quantified the straight property tax increment increase that would flow to MPUSD and the community college district. I do not attempt at this point in my career to understand state aid formulas and how they're effective. So this assumes that the districts get everything, and there's no impact on state aid formulas.
Yeah, so MPUSD is a local control funding formula based on average daily attendance and not property tax. So I'm not sure whether that number reflects.
This assumes that for every dollar increase in property tax that was under Prop 13, 1% allocation that's allocated to the school district goes to the district.
Okay.
And it gives absolutely no analysis to what would happen under their deal with the state.
Got it. Thank you. And one other question, Madam Chair. Could you sort of help me understand what the rationale was for not zeroing out those who would have a negative net benefit? Why wouldn't we just all take a haircut to make sure that nobody loses any money?
Well, I'm going to punt to my colleague Peter on this one. Peter, your turn.
Thank you. So in the case of Delray Oaks, there's two things that are happening. The first is that they don't have any buildings to remove. The administrative committee was very clear they only wanted the bond proceeds to go towards building removal. And so they said, all right, there's no building removal in Delray Oaks, therefore we're not going to allocate any proceeds. On the second component, we'll be bonding against the existing property tax in Delray Oaks on the Fort Ord component, which is, I think, really negligible. So what you're really seeing is this $53,000 loss is just a minor, but essentially accounting component. Is that how you would sum that up? Yeah. Yeah. So that's on Del Rey Oaks. As for the Monterey County Regional Fire District, there's an existing agreement between Monterey County and this particular fire district on how property tax flows from the state to the county to the fire district, and how it works under the FORA, under how FORA is now and how it works after FORA dissolves. But it's not so minor that we could just leave it and not recognize that there may be an impact to the cash flow over time. But I do believe one of the things we're requesting or recommending is that the executive officer work with the regional fire district on revenue loss related issues to try to come to a solution that would not make that number problematic.
Thank you.
Director Garfield and then Director Gagliotti.
Thank you. You said that in today's market, you think that $35,000 is a conservative estimate. $35 million is a conservative estimate about what you could float for bonds. Can you talk a little bit about, so some of that would be taxable bonds and some of it would be tax-free bonds. And what do you think is the likely offering of returns for that? I mean, what percent return are you thinking?
You mean the interest rates?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about taxable versus tax exempt.
Yeah.
This is a very important piece and actually goes to bond administration. Remediation on property that will ultimately be used by a private developer, those bonds need to be sold on a taxable basis, meaning the people who invest in those bonds pay income tax on the interest they receive. That's because there's private use. And the vast majority of the remediation that needs to be done in Fort Ord is on property that, as I understand it, is intended to be used by private developers. However, we all know that even when you're doing a single-family tract development, 20-25% of the land within a typical 100-unit subdivision ends up being public right-of-way. You know, streets, sidewalks, you name it. So what we have assumed is that about 20% of the bond proceeds would be tax exempt, assuming that we are going to have kind of the normal percentage of public right-of-way. But we have tasked Marina and Seaside and the county staff with coming back to us with what they believe is the right allocation between property that's being remediated that will end up in public right-of-way, either park or whatever, or is going to end up being privately developed. And so that question is still on the table. We just made assumptions. We think we've been conservative, but who knows? We'll find out. As far as bond yields, tax exempt yields right now on like 25 and 30 years for, I'd say, quality investment grade paper, and I do believe we can get that for this because of bond insurance, are right around 3%. I mean, and in some cases you have people who are really good names borrowing. This is probably not for FORA, but the best names in the country are borrowing 30 years at probably 2.75% right now. It's just unbelievable. I've never seen rates this low. Taxable is basically a percentage point, we say 100 basis points higher. So you're looking at maybe 4%, even 3.5 to 4% taxable. Those are interest rates that a year ago you'd be happy to get tax exempt, and are now at a taxable yield in that area. So you can tell I'm bald and kind of white-haired. I've been around for a while, and I have never seen rates this low. So I'm looking to get towards them now.
Director Gagliotti?
Yeah, I got it. Here we go. Peter and his buddies could probably blow $54,000 in a long weekend, but that's not de minimis to Del Rey Oaks by any means. What it is, though, it's our commitment to this region and really to Seaside Marina is that we want to see the blight removal, and we feel that a few $1,000s a year for the next 30 years to help that effort is very much worth it. I just wanted to be on public record to say that.
Okay, sir. Yes, Director Berkeley.
I just have two more quick questions, and you've touched on this already, but I just want to be clear. I'm wondering, what is the basis for the allocations of the funds? Because as far as I'm aware, there's been no public FORA board discussion on the formula for the allocations.
So your question is, what is the basis for the allocation of the funds? Okay, just writing that down for my notes. First, I'd like to address Chair Gigliotti. That's only Saturday. The basis for the allocation of the funds, to get to your questions, is that what we have done is we know exactly how many buildings are in exactly what parcels. And we have an estimate for each building and building type. Some of them are wood, some of them are concrete, some of them big, some of them are small. We use the actual building removal numbers that we were able to generate off the Surplus 2 project that our partners at the Dunes have given us. We've used numbers from CSUMB. We've collected information, and we use that as our base estimate amount to be able to come up with a square footage number. So we know about how much square footage there is, how much dollar cost there is per square footage, and that comes up with the number for the parcel. The next question is where is the parcel? Is it in Seaside's jurisdiction? Is it in Marina's jurisdiction? Is it in the county jurisdiction? And so we allocate according to where the parcels are located. So for instance, the county has 2.5 million. Currently they have the ammo supply point. It has a number of underground bunkers and former munition storage areas. It also has a number of wood buildings that had been used for training, kind of all over the development areas back in there. They're just kind of sporadic through there. They're a fire hazard, they're a public hazard. We've got periodically people have to go out and clear those areas out. So that we know that given the square footage and the estimated cost, that there's about $2.5 million worth of building removal in Monterey County. We did the same thing for MST, MCWD, TAMC, and state parks. So for instance, state parks has the water facility over here across the highway.
Yeah, the old wastewater treatment plant.
That's correct. So we just calculated an estimate for that, and we allocated that to that particular parcel. We've done this for each of the jurisdictions, and that's the primary basis for allocation. As we move into discussion with the administrative committee, and this is the work that we have ahead of us, we still need to get clarity on the prioritization for that, because we've got about $54 million of building removal and only $37 million of bond, so we have to figure out what goes where. And then we have to work with each of the jurisdictions to determine exactly what they want to get removed and how we're going to split this allocation out. So there's going to be an ongoing conversation. Once that conversation has gone through the administrative committee, it will then come to the board for a recommendation, and you will be able to have the chance to look at that allocation and adjust it as you believe is necessary.
Okay, that would be great. It sounds like you put a lot of thought into it. If it's possible, before we review it, if we could get a copy of the breakdown, that would be very helpful. I was disappointed a little bit that it wasn't in the packet, but now it sounds you have clear thoughts, so if you could get that, that'd be great. Thank you. The second question is that nowhere in the documentation, other than in the staff report, unless maybe I missed something, it doesn't specifically say that these funds will be allocated solely for blight removal. So I would assume that will be written in the bond itself?
That's been the strong recommendation of the administrative committee to this FORA board. Ultimately, it's up to the board to determine how the bonds get spent, but the strong recommendation from the administrative committee is keep it on building removal.
I see. So recommendation is a little bit different than commitment.
The decision is the board's.
This decision is the board's, yes.
So when is that decision made?
What we're recommending here is that we establish a prioritization process for fund distribution, how to use, and we bring this back for board approval.
Okay.
We're only asking for authority to prepare everything, put it together, make sure it's legally correct, bring it back for decisions and go take that through the administrative committee process. The administrative committee has been on this from day one and have not wavered. Lane Long, I think, would agree with that. Have not wavered in
No,
building removal, building removal, building removal. So I think
his
that's what's
mantra.
coming back.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And so when it's coming back, though, I understand. It's December, I heard.
We're to hope to have legal documents back at your September board meeting. And if I could add to what Michael said, the question you asked about commitment recommendation also goes to the bond administration agreement question. And that's another reason why that is so important, so that we all have clarity and agreement on that question.
Okay, terrific. And it does get actually written in the bond itself, correct? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your.
If I may, Chair. Thank you. One last question. To Peter, you referenced the allocation of building removal and calculating how it was done in jurisdictions. Does your allocation when you're doing it at the building removal, does that include the stockade, or is the stockade separate because it's already been allotted 4.3 million?
Stockade is the number one priority in the FORA CIP for building removal. It is up to the board to determine how it wants to allocate funds. If it wants to allocate more funds or prioritize more funds to stockade, it's welcome to do that. The allocations have not been set. I just gave a preliminary allocation of, I believe for Marina was 18 million. It'll be up to the administrative committee as we prepare the administration documents to determine how they want to allocate that for which building sites and whatnot.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other board member questions before I take it out to the public? Yes, Director Wizard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just real quick for the board's benefit and for the record, the Monterey Peninsula Unified School District serves the majority of the students who are represented on this board, except possibly Salinas because they're such a large city, would not necessarily benefit from this bond because they are funded through child attendance, not property tax revenue. So I appreciate that private development of currently blighted lands will cause there to be an increase in population, which would then create more funding from the state, but they are not going to intercept tax revenue, and so increased property value by way of removing buildings does not net them $26 million.
Thank you. Director Adams.
Thank you so much. Going back to the bond administration agreement that we were talking about, will we have all of these issues that are listed under element 2A worked out so that everything will be determined before the bonds are issued?
Yes, that's why in fact, I'm supposed to present a draft of the bond administration agreement just for discussion purposes at the next finance committee meeting next week. And so we want to get going on that. The way the financing schedule works from the board's perspective, we're going to come back at your September meeting with the basic bond documents that we need to do essentially under Mark's ruse. Then at your October meeting, we're going to come back with the disclosure document. And if we don't have the bond administration agreement worked out by your September board meeting, we come back at your October board meeting with it. But yes, absolutely, no bonds are issued until we get all those things worked out and get consensus.
Okay, thank you for that. And I just had one other question. Talking about NHA contracting and working directly with SYCR, I'm just wondering, do we need to go through any kind of an RFP program, RFP or an RFP to contract with them? Or
We did in the selection of NHA advisors before. We went through a request for qualifications process and selected them competitively already.
so with NHA, yes, but what about with the attorneys? Because I think, or the bond counsel, because I think that, as I see it presented from the staff recommendation, it's two separate contracts. And my only thought is that if in fact we do not need to do that, we should probably be conscious of doing some sort of a finding, something so that everything is clearly defined.
Yes, I would agree. Stradling is NHA Advisors consultant. They're your consultant. At the moment, we'll be continuing to use them through the NHA Advisors contract. We are asking not necessarily for a separate contract, but to be able to include a $65,000 contingency for additional costs that may occur.
And that's in addition to the $200,000?
That's correct. it's a contingency.
Thank you. I did have just one question before we go to the public. I want to be sure I understand the prioritization for the process of the revenue, the bond revenue allocation. So you're going to work with the administrative committee. They've been up to their eyeballs in this. So will their recommendations, when we get this back in September, will they sort of take, okay, it looks like Marina has about this much bond money coming in to take care of blight removal, building removal. Seaside has this much, the county has this much. Is the admin committee going to say, sort of within those allocations or within the allocation as a whole, our top priorities are, you know, the buildings on the hill or the buildings at the main gate? Is that the kind of detail that they're going to get into the document so that there's guidance for whoever is releasing the money?
Yes. And on top of that, we already use what we call an evidence-based prioritization process. The reason we use that process is it helps get rid of some of the horse trading that happens when trying to prioritize. We have solid evidence and engineering analysis as to why. I mean, that's more than you guys want, but we have the analysis to show why the priorities are what they are. And in doing so, that allows us to have a mechanism to continue to prioritize beyond the FORA dissolution.
Yes, right, which is coming back. Right, exactly. Well, that's what we'll see in September. Yes, Mr. Zeller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a follow-on question about the prioritization. Since TAMC is grouped with MST, MCWD, and state parks, has there been any thought about how those bond proceeds would be shared between those agencies? Would there be agreements, or how would the prioritization for that grouping work?
That will need to be worked out in the bond administration documents, which is what we're seeking for approval so that we can go ahead and move forward into that process. We do have an estimated amount that the TAMC buildings will cost to remove, and we'll have to discuss with the admin committee on what they would recommend, and then to bring that to this board to figure out what you would like to do.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to ask a question or make a comment on this?
Ron Cheshire, Monterey Santa Cruz Building and Construction Trades Council. Blight has been used as a tool to stop economic development out here at FORA. And it's been used by individuals and groups that don't want to see us move forward. The promise that was made, the third E that hasn't really been fulfilled. Developers have an issue with the blight, the fact that trying to get businesses to come into the area and such with the way it looks is a little tough. I would hope, at the building trades, we would hope that you would really research and move forward. You can take $37 million and take care of a significant amount. Maybe willing to toss out the old idea that's been tossed out in the past to both congressmen and to staff in regards to lobbying the federal government for the additional amount, and that the federal government would be paid back when those parcels were sold. Isn't that a novel idea? It's actually the government getting their money back. Another thing in regards to this effort is FORA and the jurisdictions haven't ever taken advantage of training. You have capital improvement projects or so in the area, but yet you have an issue with jobs. You've never married them together. This is an excellent opportunity. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but we want to discuss that also. Getting young people or our people in this area jobs. Jobs to where they can afford to live with. Your community members, your constituents, your voters, the ones that have really been ignored for way too many years. So that's it. We would really like to hope that you would really consider this and move forward on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public with a comment?
Madam Chair and fellow board members, David Sargenti, Deputy Chief of the Monterey County Regional Fire District. A couple things I'd like to speak to the proposal today, give you a little bit of the history in 2006 and then again in 2008, we annexed areas of the FORA area into the fire district as requested by the County of Monterey. Then fast forward to 2018 in May, we opened up our East Garrison Fire Station, which serves the neighborhoods of East Garrison as well as the regional area. The district does support the removal of the buildings for its next phase and whatever development is appropriate for those areas. However, we can't support that with any degradation of our funding sources. It is anticipated that not a lot of the growth that was anticipated to be in the county areas will be there. And to that extent, the district is fully funded off of property tax, or our major funding source is property tax. So any degradation of that reflects into our service levels that we can provide. It's understood that the cities and municipalities in the FORA area will grow, and with that growth, those folks will be going through the district and either participating in the environment and entertainment areas around the FORA, mainly the National Monument and the county parks, those type of things, and it's recognized that that is in the fire district and those will be impacts to our district. So what we do request is, and we appreciate the recommendation, but we do request that rather than just work with our district to resolve this issue, that we actually do resolve the issue rather than just work through it. And we do appreciate the support that the board has, and on behalf of our board of directors, we appreciate the time invested.
Thank you. Any other member of the public with a question or comment? All right, I'll bring it back to this board for action, maybe as a follow-up, Mr. Northcross, as to the fire district. Do you have some concepts that you're looking at to resolve the issue of their depleted or potentially depleted funding?
This board and staff has the legal authority under the authorizing statute to spend the bond proceeds on any improvement that is authorized under this statute for FORA. So if there's things that the fire district needs that are within the context of the authorizing statute, then this board, working with your staff, can make that allocation.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Director Phillips.
I know we discussed it at our board meeting, and the big winners in this are Marina and Seaside, but I think we have to look at it from a regional standpoint too. And one of the biggest problems we've had, and one of the biggest concerns people have, is the blight removal. And so I think it has a regional impact. It's not so positive for the county as it is some of the other jurisdictions, but they're part of our county too. So I think the problem is working out the details of it to make sure that we have some money left for administration and the other things. But I think it's a wise idea. We probably should have done it sooner.
Director O'Connell?
Yes. As you know, you may not know, our city manager actually seconded the administration committee to proceed with this, and the city is fully in support of it. But the problem that I have, like all elected officials, is you're going to make a vote. You're going to have to make a vote based on full knowledge. I was hoping that our bond counsel would have been in contact with the bond counsel relating to this matter before it came to today. And I was hoping that Mark may have had the answers as to what the concerns were about the statute, but evidently they don't. So I'm going to be voting no solely because I am very, very concerned as to what my bond counsel is going to be telling me after she hears back from the bond counsel. Hopefully it can all be resolved very quickly, and I urge Mark to please get in contact so everyone touches base as quickly as possible. Thank you.
I would actually like to second that. I actually very much agree with what Ron Cheshire said about growth and getting rid of the blight and the priority. I will be voting no on this for the exact same reasons.
We approve this and move the matter forward.
There's a motion by Gunter, second by, sorry, was it Smith? Good, thank you. Any other
Madam Chair?
discussion?
I'm
Yes.
just wondering if you might accept a friendly expansion on your motion, which I will totally be in support of, and that is regarding the Monterey Regional Fire District. If we could simply put in that we will strengthen the language regarding the Regional Fire District to guarantee the replenishment of their funds so that they are not at a loss. Would you accept that? Excellent. Thank you very much.
Who's ever next?
Sure. I don't know who's next. So Director Cagliotti and then Director Oglesby.
Sure. I'd also like to request maybe a slight amendment to that, in that that in this vote is a commitment by the board to the current priority of building removal.
Director Oglesby.
I'm not against the friendly amendment, but I want to make sure, I want to have a better understanding on where does those proceeds to make the regional fire district whole come from, and how it's divided and who it comes from. But I just want to say, John can speak for himself, but speaking for CSA, we're in full support of this. For us, I think there's more than enough information, and I think it's going to come back to the board to talk about what priorities we have. And I think it was said 2 or 3 times about at the admin meeting, the jurisdiction's administrative team is going to help to prioritize each jurisdiction's blight removal. And as a board, we'll sign off on some of those things when they come back. But for us to sit up here and try to decide that today or anytime soon, there's nothing to decide if we don't move the bond request forward. So I'm in full support of moving the bond request forward.
Yes, Director Cagliotti.
Yeah, it was just kind of inspired by something that Mayor Oglesby just brought up. I mean, we do have to strike kind of by the iron pot, and I appeal to Marina. I understand your concerns, and maybe not all of your answers are answered right now, but I have confidence in the board that any issues that may arise or may come out of the discussions between council could be fleshed out in the actual appropriations or in the writing of the document. And by not voting, by not having a unanimous vote on this, it would kick this issue down to a second vote, and then we're at risk of some sort of changes in the economy, some sort of changes in the bond market. And I just think that to maximize the benefit of this effort, it would be best to just go ahead and have a unanimous vote right now, kick off MHA, and let them start the process. And any issues that would need to be fleshed out quickly. Your city manager supported this wholeheartedly. I think he's a very competent city manager. He understands the process. He understands the people. So I just appeal to Marina to maybe reconsider their comfort with this vote.
Yes, Director Smith.
Yeah, I just want to sort of look at this in a couple different slices. The way I look at the recommendation is really this is to launch into a scope of services for contractors first, and then we're going to be able to see the fruits of their work with staff. And the last 2 items here resonate with me about why I would do this without having all of the detail in front of us as if this is a completed package. It will be, just not today, because we are tasking staff and the contractors to secure jurisdictional support for the proposed schedule, which means there's still a lot of work to be done after we say yes today, and also work with the regional and fire districts on revenue loss related issues. So to me that means we're going to try and work this out so that the fire district is made whole and we figure out the distribution going forward. So I am firmly in support of this. I thought the Alan Hoffa prior to this, he also has indicated he's in support of it, and our city manager is in support of it. Because I think this is the go-forward plan to be able to make sure that we address the blight that we've all been talking about. And I too support how we can get the blight out of the way and get the proceeds from the property tax enhancements. And so the city of Monterey supports moving ahead to a bond.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to just check with the marina representatives to see if there might be some language that, if the maker of the motion is willing, could be included in the motion to make it clear that your support is contingent on these, on the bond council, Marina's bond council issues getting resolved. Or, is there some language that could be included that would give you sufficient comfort to be able to vote in favor of the general direction today?
Personally, no. And I'll say why is because this has been something that's been discussed with our bond council for a long time, and they've indicated on numerous occasions to officials who should be making decisions on this that in fact there are serious concerns that we have. I don't know now what took place in the phone call on yesterday, but as late as the executive committee meeting, I spoke to the executive officer, and he assured me that they in fact would be touching base with each other, and I believe that is fact true. But I was emailing my bond counsel today and said, what's taking place? And she said they just heard from them yesterday and specifically stated there are statutes that they have to look at. I'd be foolish if I were to make a decision to support anything without having a full or better understanding of what my bond counsel, my legal counsel, is telling me is the appropriate for the city. So I would love to, and everyone supports it, but I just have to touch all the bases as best I can. So no, I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Thanks. Director Raymond.
Oh, I just want to say that Carmel by the Sea supports going forward and supports all of the jurisdictions being able to address the buildings that need to be removed and then the property used in a more productive way.
Madam Chair, before we vote, and I only made the motion because I know that this is the first step in a long process that we're going to start moving forward. And by holding it up one more month, maybe the interest rates will change, maybe the economy will tank, no one knows. But I do know this, Marina has votes on the board and they're going to vote how they feel. There's city managers here who sits on the administrative committee, and we didn't hear this saber rattling before we started. And I think we're at the point on this board where we have continued to slow down any progress or forward motion. And considering that their concern is blight removal, and as I drive out of here, I get to see all their blight, including the stockade that we would all love to see. And I'm well aware that it's at the top of the CIP. And it's almost tragic that you're willing to hold hostage the rest of the people from Seaside and Monterey County. So I think we need to take the vote and move forward to bring it back next month.
If I may, the failure of having the knowledge that's necessary to vote yes is not the responsibility of City of Marina or its bond council, and I think anyone who's been involved in this situation over the many months is fully aware of that.
Thank you. Any other directors?
Through the chair,
Yes.
I would like just to know if our bond counsel is communicating with Marina's bond counsel, I would like some type of summary of what the concerns were. And so we can at least have that for our next meeting, that from our perspective, we answered those questions and what were the questions. So thank you so much.
Practical questions. Yes. Is it possible for us, God forbid, to have a special meeting earlier in September so that we can bring it back to the second vote then, so that we don't lose traction from the schedule that has been laid out? Is that possible?
The chair of the executive committee of the board can call a special meeting at any time, although it should be, I think there's a 72-hour waiting that's included in our program before we have this next meeting. So you could call a meeting tonight for Monday evening, or you could call something for next Thursday. A number of things you could do. But this, in order to capture moving ahead, you have to do it earlier. If you wait till September, you've lost a month.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, so we do have a motion with a couple of friendly amendments. Yes, Director Berkeley.
So we could have another meeting after Car Week and not lose traction.
All right, so we have a motion and a second with a few amendments, and Director Garfield would like to speak.
Thank you. I'm belated processing here. Is there a possibility of carving out your concern, Frank? I'm sorry, Director O'Connell, as a separate motion and allow this to proceed in all meaningful ways to move forward with many elements? Or is your concern such that if you can't get your answers, then none of these things can proceed until then?
Until I hear from my bond counsel, I'm not willing to vote yet. I am very willing to have a special meeting as quickly as possible. I would not say Monday, since it's a Friday and attorneys have a tendency to go to lunch and not come back until Sunday night.
Well, you can't guarantee what your bond counsel is or isn't going to do, and when they're going to answer their phone, and when somebody else is going to answer their call.
They have made efforts, and I can certainly tell my city manager to get in touch with them as quickly as possible.
I take it back then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you. So we have a motion. Yes, Director Berkeley. We have a motion and a second, and I think definitely a desire to get Marina's bond counsel concerns addressed, if possible. I will say that we are eager to get this done as quickly as possible, but I do think we actually have time. We need to get it done before June, so we're moving along. So I think we don't have to panic. It would be nice to get it done sooner rather than later. And then the other thing that I would ask too is, and I think the administrative committee is doing this, as we're looking at the prioritization, the way it's been broken down here is very much by jurisdiction, but we are a regional body, and we need to remember that, I mean, it's clear that the vast bulk of the buildings that need removing are in Marina, and so we don't want to monkey with that too much, but I do think that the administrative committee can work on a good broad program that will reflect and get the desired broader community benefit. Anyone else wishing to speak before? Yes, Director Smith.
Just a real quick observation. I can't believe I would ever say this, but this is an example of why a second vote is in play here. So Marina will have an opportunity for a second vote when this comes back. So, I mean, this is not a monumental, oh my goodness, what are we doing? This is moving ahead. The answers will come probably next week. There'll be a second vote, and I hope it'll be unanimous on the second vote. So I feel very comfortable moving ahead to get staff working.
Quickly, my understanding is the second vote is not required to be unanimous, and I know he didn't say that, but I just want to be clear on the record. So, no, it's the majority.
Great. We have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Chair, if I might.
Yep.
Now that we don't have bond counsel to talk to Marina's bond counsel, can I get approval from the board that it's okay to at least hire Stradling, Yaka, Carlson, and Ralph to move ahead to discuss this with Marina Council?
So there's the executive officer is asking for a kind of interim authority to enter into a contract with NHA's bond counsel so that they can discuss these issues with Marina.
I'll just go to a point of order. I thought Marina just voted that down. Thank you so much. Well, they delayed it for 30 days or to a special meeting. They just did that. Okay, trying to figure it out.
Director Garfield.
Just a clarification. So since we're dealing with the issue separately to allow bond counsel to have authority to talk, does that mean, just clarification, that all those other bullet points are stopped cold as well?
Director Wizard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to that point, it would be my strong preference for the Executive Committee to agendize a special meeting without any further delay, because rhetorically, I don't understand what the virtue is of voting no when there will be a special meeting within 96 hours to vote again and pass it anyway.
No. Okay. I don't think we need to get into a discussion on that particular item, but point taken though about the special meeting for a second vote. We'll move now to business item 8C, consultant services contract extensions and amendments.
Yes, Chair, the board report I think is fairly clear, but Josh will take you through each of these. Based on the action under item 8B, I have to assume that item 8 under consultant services for EPS would have to be modified. That would take out the financial consultant report. That's included. But I think the others, Josh will take you through those.
Hello, everyone. Josh Metz, Economic Development and Planning Manager. FORA staff has seen 6 key staff departures due to retirement and employees finding positions elsewhere since January. And so there's need for additional consultant services to support remaining professional staff and ensure completion of key ongoing capital improvements, planning, and transition-related projects. These additional consultant services were contemplated in the fiscal year 2019-20 budget and capital improvements program. So the first is the one Michael just referenced, Economic Planning Systems, which does the financial analysis for a number of our programs. There was an amendment, and it's had a series of amendments. We'll begin here with Amendment 10, which added additional funds for a 2018 biennial fee study, which was completed. Then there's Amendment 11, which provided $75,000 for 2 additional tasks. The 2020 biennial fee study is Task 1, and Task 2 is Transition Planning and Building Removal Program Analysis. Total contract to date is not to exceed just about $400,000, with about $50,000 remaining. And so the staff recommendation here was increasing the contract amount for Amendment 11, Task 2, by $80,000, which was $40,000 for the fiscal or financial consultant report as part of the bond issuance process, and $40,000 for HCP cost impact analysis. The next is Reimer Associate Consulting, RAC. RAC provides project coordination and support for work pertaining to FORA, CIP, ESCA, and planning programs. There's an existing not to exceed contract of $315,787, which was approved in January. About 40% of that has been invoiced and is primarily related to South Boundary Road and Seaside Munitions Response Area munitions response plans. And there is additional anticipated need in planning and executive function support for the CIP coordination, HCP, consistency determinations, and other deliverables as assigned. There's a recommendation to increase the contract amount not to exceed an additional $100,000. The next is Harrison Associates, which provides construction management, inspection, and prevailing wage monitoring support, in addition to constructability reviews and public bidding support. There's 3 service work orders for Surplus 2, Stockade, and Eucalyptus Road projects. The total amount of those contracts is shown here, just over $1 million, with about 50% of that work complete. And there's a recommendation here for adding additional service work order not to exceed $100,000 for construction management and inspection support, Eucalyptus Road stormwater engineering support, and South Boundary Road constructability reviews. Finally, we have RGS, Regional Government Services, which provides human resource and transition plan implementation consulting services. There was an initial not to exceed 110,000 human resource consulting contract in December. There's no adjustment recommended at this time for that piece. There was a board approved not to exceed 100,000 transition plan implementation consulting services contract in January. RGS will be 95% through this contract amount as of July 31st. And due to anticipated additional transition-related needs and support needs, the recommendation is to increase the contract an additional not to exceed 100,000 for that work. So the recommendation here is to authorize the executive officer to negotiate and approve consultant services contract extension amendments as summarized here.
Thank you. Any board members with questions or comments on this recommendation? Yes, Director Adams.
Thank you. I just am a little bit confused about why we're doing this now, and number one. And then I wish that we had a bit more expanded information like we did from RGS. This makes complete sense, but, just to have something kind of general made me a little bit less apt to just blindly throw. I couldn't even add that high. Whatever the number was to the budgets and such that we already have, which makes me want to suggest that we take the contracts and vote on them individually, because I'd like to see RGS continue forward, and I'm happy with their proposal, but just am kind of questioning if we really need to be doing this right now. And help me if you can explain that better to me.
Sure. So I will probably call on Peter for some backfilling here, but I'll do my best with what I know, which is that particularly for the EPS contract, there was a time-sensitive need to advance the fiscal consultant report. We heard from Mark Northcross that was one of the key time-consuming elements to getting the bond issuance going fast. So that was a driver of the need, and the idea was to bring it all forward as efficiently as possible for your consideration. Regarding the RAC, Reimer Associates, there has been some very near-term staff departures, particularly Jonathan Brinkman moving over to LAFCO, which has driven a demand for additional support needs in planning that wasn't contemplated in her original contract. And so that's basically the scope that's outlined here. As far as Harrison Associates, I'll defer to Peter on that one.
While Peter's on his way up, Supervisor, just a quick note. Part of the EPS contract is in support of the work that RGS is doing with transition planning. So they're kind of linked together. Part of it is providing the request the City of Marina and City of Seaside made about understanding the impact of Habitat Conservation Plan on the transition and how that works is what a key element of the EPS contract is. For example, we tried to write it in there, and I apologize that we don't have it that crystal clear, but each of these is a consequence of our anticipated reduction in staff, which is what we included in the budget before. And each of these is to try to backfill for the staffing gaps, as well as some recent changes, including South Boundary Road is now moving ahead, so we need to have the soils management plans and the control. All of those pieces have to be put in place. We could wait, but they're all integrated. So if you approve one and you don't approve the other, then it prevents RGS from moving forward on.
I get that. And so can you tell me, though, with the staff having left, does this remain revenue neutral to bring on the additional consultants, or are we adding?
All of this we anticipated in the budget. We recognize that instead of bringing new folks on, the board's policy was to try to prevent additional risk, liability associated with CalPERS, to use consultants where we could to backfill. So this is consistent with that decision that the board made a couple of months ago. And so this was all anticipated. The money was put in the budget for those reasons. And we're bringing back to you now much more refined how we want to use those.
So you will not be coming back to the board with seeking additional authority once we approve these consultants?
I think there's one where we may be looking for additional authority in the future, depending on the outcome of what happens with service work order number 4. But otherwise, as of right now, we do not anticipate further requests. The board may make decisions differently about RGS's use in the future, so I don't want to completely say no, never, but we don't anticipate major changes after this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members with questions or comments on this?
Awake?
Director Garth.
Are we awake? Yeah. Just to underscore, I think Supervisor Adams' question almost completely answered mine, but it sounded as you went through this that all of these are because of either new work that's being necessitated by change decisions or replacements for staffing to continue already approved ongoing work.
Yes, I think that's correct. The one different one was with EPS. The work on the habitat was a separate issue that surfaced after the budget was approved, having to do with...
And I guess the other side of that is that none of these requests are because the work is proven to be more expensive than we thought it would be.
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any public comment on this item? I'll bring it back to the board for a motion. I think if one is disposed to make a motion to approve these recommendations, might just be prudent to note that the EPS contract for the financial consultancy report would not be entered into until, or negotiated until that is fully approved. So I would entertain a motion along those lines.
If I may,
Yes.
the fiscal consultant report is really just a look at FORA's credit, is what it is. And that look at FORA's credit just informs us on how we can move forward. It does take a large amount of time to do. It's something that I would recommend you consider doing, despite it's like a second bite at the apple, as it were. It allows this process to continue to move forward.
Anyone want to make a motion?
I move that we accept the recommendation to authorize the executive officer to execute consultant services, contract extensions, and amendments as written.
I second.
Thank you. Motion by Ramers, second by Gagliotti. Any further discussion? Yes.
I just need to clarify, there is a Reamer without the S. We are not related. There is no relationship. Thank you, Director
Not a family
Reimers.
member, no conflict of interest. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll move to business item 8D, Transition Plan and Implementing Agreement Progress Report.
Kendall is here, has a PowerPoint presentation for everyone's consumption. She promises it'll be less than 7 minutes.
I can make it in 5. And I don't know, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to continue to work with this board for a little bit longer. We're really enjoying it. I'm here today to just give you a brief update, and I want to tell you in advance, full disclosure, it's our intention to be at every board meeting here on out through the process. However, at the September board meeting, we had an opportunity to go to Fiji, and as much as I love you all, we will be in Fiji, and we will be thinking about you, I'm sure, every day. All right, so as you know, here we are in the path of implementation. At this point, we are here in August. We have completed the initial drafts of the implementing agreements. However, as I think the executive officer stated, we're waiting on the legislature to get the final. We are in receipt of additional comments from legal counsel at the county, as well as LAFCO and a few other folks that are out there. But we're going to, rather than piecemeal those edits and dribble them out, we're going to wait until we find out what the final determination is from the Monning Bill, and then we will release those for public review and for your internal folks to take a look at. The other pieces, as you know, we're going to be starting to have discussions about habitat conservation plan, and you'll be seeing us through the admin committee, hopefully starting to get everyone back on the mindset of where we are with the JPA, how that's going to break out, and as the executive officer mentioned, that's something that EPS will be looking at in terms of costs. But I know we know that a number of issues have come up with the member agencies about how that's going to play out. Water is moving along really well. In fact, Peter just gave me some updated information that I believe will be coming back to the board probably next month. We should have agreements certainly by the end of the fall with some additional information that relates to their allocation numbers. And then, of course, the big one right now is the ESCA, the Army cleanup and whatnot. I've been working with Stan on that, and just want to point out again, we still are on two paths. I know this has been kind of challenging for all of us, but we still have to go about this as if either the legislation passes or it does not. So it doesn't affect our work program right now, but we're looking at it both ways. So at this point, as I mentioned, implementing agreements, we've got them as far as we can without having that last bit from the state. And now we look at the ESCA agreements. So as far as ESCA goes, Stan put together a really good diagram, which is in your agenda packages. But basically, it's a 5-step process. And the RGS team is working very closely with Stan and his team, and then we'll further that relationship with FORA and obviously the Army, Department of Toxic Substances, and the other good folks. So we have 5 steps here, and right now, Stan and his team have completed the initial agreement between FORA and ESCA and FORA and Seaside. That's under review currently from the Seaside legal team. We're also looking at the jurisdictions to execute written confirmation that will basically agree that you think Seaside will be the next agency that will provide those services. And I've kind of stepped over step 2 a bit, but the Army is providing a list of criteria that Stan and the city of Seaside are looking at, and they're crafting their plan now to make sure that they can meet all those criteria. The board, I'm sure, will recall that you approved contracts earlier this year for the consultant teams that were doing the actual work. And since the team from FORA is moving to Seaside, it's really just a matter of how they're going to facilitate all that. But the people and individuals and the experience are all still in place. So we anticipate a positive outcome on that. And then we look kind of ahead there at step 4. Then we'll be looking at all the different pieces that allow those final implementing agreements to go in place. And once that's all completed, which we believe will probably be in the next 2 to 3 months-ish, depending on what comes back from Department of Toxic Substances, we should be able to execute the final agreements between FORA and Seaside, and then with all the agencies that are affected. So keeping in mind the big group up here, the first one is between FORA, Seaside, and the Army that basically says we agree that they are going to take this on. Then there'll be the second set of agreements that are between those of you who have property within that area that'll have an agreement with Seaside, and then there'll be some closures about how people will go on. We did present a very preliminary look-see at that agreement at the admin committee. There were some substantial problems with that, so we've since pulled that back. We're editing it and working again with the county council and with Stan's folks on that. So I think that's pretty much where we are now. If you also noted in your agenda package, there was a very brief next steps for us in terms of what RGS will be doing. We anticipate tying up the implementing agreements again following the action at the state. Then we'll continue to work with FORA staff on finalizing the ESCA agreements. And there are 13 individual agreements that appear in that pack of 118 agreements. Michael's laughing because he had to read them all. Anyway, we are revising all of those, but again, we have to wait just a little bit more until these other agreements are set so we can put that final language in. And then also, for the benefit of council, one of the things in our agreement with FORA was the ability to actually vet some of these out from a legal perspective with FORA's legal counsel so we can make sure that they're all good to go for dissemination. And that is pretty much it. That ends my presentation, but I'm of course available for questions or comments of any type.
Thank you. Any board member questions or comments for Ms. Flint? I did just want to double check. It sounds as though this whole ESCA process is going forward as if FORA might sunset in 2020. If the extension legislation passes and FORA or some version thereof continues, wouldn't we just continue to pass
No.
the ESCA thing along to Seaside?
Yeah, the goal here is basically to have Seaside take this over in first or second quarter of 2020. So we want to
No.
go sooner rather than later.
Regardless. Right.
Because
Okay.
that, again, reduces the PERS liability from FORA's standpoint, and they're all ready to go. So the sooner we can get that done, the better off.
Great. That was sort of the tenor of the conversation we had a few months back, so I just wanted to make sure we're still on that track. And then in terms of the HCP, JPA, I know some questions and issues came up. When do you anticipate that some of the questions will be answered enough that there will be the ability for the admin committee to talk through kind of the broader principles and the points of agreement or disagreement on the formation of the JPA?
Sure. So I've talked with the chairman of the admin committee from Delray Oaks, and obviously also with the executive officer. Our anticipation is to start those conversations in the admin committees September, October, November, and get that going sooner rather than later. There was also, I believe the FORA staff circulated a preliminary look of the contract that would establish the JPA. So we're going to ask that that gets distributed again, just in case people missed it, so that we can look over that and figure out where the challenges are. I think what we shared with some of the members, because it's come back to us, is that there's some concern about how that is going to play out in terms of who pays for what, and with some of the very exciting things you're doing in terms of building removal and what you're doing with some of the funds, how at the end of the day is this going to be paid for, and what is the fiscal responsibility for each of the member agencies. So that's part of the conversation of working that through with the Joint Powers Authority, and then also figuring out, frankly, how that's going to be managed once this is all done. Because if you're successful in getting this all together, then really that should be a very easy thing where it's just a pass through with the cash and should be very simple. We want to make sure that that is all discussed prior to the sunset of 2020 or 2022 so that everyone's comfortable with that and understands clearly what their roles and responsibilities are going to be.
Great. And part of the way that some of those questions that have come up might get answered would be through the work that EPS is going to do. So is that anticipated to be done within a month or two so that the admin committee has the information they need?
Well, I spoke with EPS last week, and obviously it will matter greatly about when the board approves that next step, right, for that particular piece of it. I don't know if that may have happened in this month. It did. Okay. So basically, those are concurrent efforts. So we're looking at EPS doing the financial side of it. We're also looking at the environmental side of it, which is basically looking at that EIR that's coming out for the HCP and figuring out what the costs are going to be. And those numbers have been estimated by staff and are part of that document. So taking all of those things together and then working with the environmental team as well as EPS and then member agencies, we should have a really clear understanding about what that's going to look like.
Thank you. All right. If there are no board members with questions at the moment, I will open it up to the public. Any members of the public wanting to comment or raise a question on transition plan update? All right. We'll close the public comment and bring it back. So this is just information. Right?
Yes, I forgot one thing though, and I did want to make sure that everyone that wanted it would be know that it was available. We are going to be presenting to the Delray Oaks City Council next week on the 13th, and I've spoken with Melanie at the county. She has also asked for a presentation that kind of brings their board up to speed on all these things that are happening, despite the fact we have so many board members attending. If there are other member agencies that are interested in similar presentations, please just let me know, and we're more than happy to come to your city and discuss what's happening in terms of the transition and implementing agreements.
Were those extra meetings in your budget?
Yeah, they were. Of course they were.
All right, thank you. Any final comments from board members? All right, then we will move to business item 8E. Special District Risk Management Authority Board of Directors election.
Chair, I've done a couple of presentations on this in the past, and we provided all the background information, and the board did not indicate a strong desire to vote one way or another, and staff is happy to proceed as you choose.
Great. So what is yes, Director Garfield.
I have no idea what this is about. I don't know historically what the votes have been. I don't feel prepared to vote with any modicum of information about this. So I'm going to actually move to table.
Okay. Table or, yeah,
Could-
Director Ogilvy?
No, no, I understand that, but I would just a comment. No, you were fine. I think we just I understand table, but we need to do it in a way it never comes back. Just we just need to let the record show that we have no intentions on take care of this. That's my point.
Should I make a different motion? I move that we don't do this because we don't know what we're doing.
Madam Chair, I think we should move to postpone indefinitely.
Oh, okay. There's a motion to postpone indefinitely, and there was a second. Did I hear? Okay, right. Yes, Ms. Brammer.
I don't understand it either, but I did read all of their resumes, and I, of course, made choices because I thought we had to. Now, do we have to do this? What is involved here?
No, for all the members, I'll repeat what I talked with the Special District Management Authority about this process. It's your choice. The board has chosen in the past to do this. They've done it several different ways in the past. They've asked staff to make a recommendation. We've done that a couple of times. Other times the board executive committee made a recommendation to the board after looking at the background. Staff has no questions about the board's decision on this one. An indefinite decision means when it would come back in 2 years, it wouldn't be around anyway.
All right. We do have a motion, but I will open it up to the public in case any member of the public wants to comment. All right, I'll bring it back to this board. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. We now come to the public comment period. Any member of the public wishing to comment on any item not on today's agenda, this is your moment. You'll have 3 minutes.
Ron Cheshire, Monterey Santa Cruz Building Construction Trades Council. I'm sure you all got my question. If you read your agenda, well, you got online and looked at it. But let's hold on to that thought for a second, okay? I want to talk a little bit about regional governments. We've had 2 of them here in this area that have been set up by the same politicians, and they've acted in quite a funny manner. Regional governments are really a very effective and efficient way to take care of problems. That's if everyone shares the same goal and doesn't have hidden agendas. I've lived in Monterey 63 and a half of my almost 68 years. You know, there's really not a lot politically that doesn't escape me. And it's been interesting here. We may have even seen a little bit of it today, but, you know, it's just the way things have been, and it's been difficult. Now back to my question. I know I won't get an answer, and I want you to know something. You're not responsible. Don't take it personally. This has been going on since 2006. You are not the only board that has been faced with the issue. Okay? I guess if you don't care that somebody's not adhering to your contracts and agreements, I don't care. If you don't care that there is theft going on in your jurisdictions and workers are being robbed, I guess I don't care either. But there will come a day, and we're waiting for it, and somebody's going to get it. Now, I'll move on to the good news. As of September 1, you won't have to put up with me any longer. Manny Pinero will be the new CEO of the Monterey Santa Cruz Building Construction Trades Council. And I looked around the room today, and I had a pretty good look. I became a representative for the Carpenters Union in 1990. Then Congressman Leon Panetta, within just a few weeks, announced that there would be a BRAC. I've been involved with this thing for 29 years. I saw the hopes and dreams of a community. I saw the fears. I saw people working through things. And it's been quite an adventure. I won't be totally going away. I'm sure Manny's got my phone number, and so do all the other guys at the district, at the building trades. And I know I'm going to be called on for advice. But I am going to go ahead and I am going to keep one position there at the council. And that's for our 501c3 and our training and education fund. We're really hoping that the jurisdictions and FORA eventually make training a priority.
Thank you, Ron.
So people can get jobs here. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it, and I'm going to miss you guys.
Any other member of the public want to try to top that? All right, so we will close public comment. And next item is items from members. Anything that any of you have going on that you think we should know about? Okay, Director Oglesby, Director Garfield, and Director Ramers.
I'll just be about 15 seconds. I want to echo some of the things Mr. Cheshire said. It's important that we make sure and I know we all agree with it. And was there a way that the executive director answered that question? Maybe not here, but I wanted to be in the record that his concerns are in the record and that we're working on those concerns. I thank the chair.
Thank you, Chair. Director Reimers and I went to a wonderful presentation today at lunch with Admiral Ann Rondow, who's the new president of Naval Postgraduate School. And if you ever get a chance to hear her talk, she is a hoot. Totally recommend it. But October 25th is NPS Day. Keep your eyes open. You get to hear what's going on at NPS in terms of economic development, in terms of collaboration with private enterprise, and the ability that they share to answer questions that concern us all about climate change, national security, weather, meteorology. All these things are going on at NPS, and it's a jewel. So I encourage you to put that on your calendar.
Well, I just want to encourage the administrative committee to continue with the process for the bond issues and doing what they would have been doing had this bond issue passed unanimously on this vote. I'm hoping we can still continue and possibly they can go ahead and at least discuss the next steps in their meetings. Whatever's legal, I hope they can do.
Yes, the executive officer wanted to respond to the training issues.
We'll look at the training recommendation that Ron made. I've already talked to Peter Said about the possibility of including training as a component of the single entity that's going to be doing building removal across the base, and the possibility of connecting the training with that. So we already required to do prevailing wage. That could be a way of not only creating the jobs, but connecting the training as well.
Anything else from board members? That then brings us to the last item on our agenda, which is adjournment. We are.